Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 1 discussion. Welcome to another day of Path of Exile 3.29 teaser season. Today we got the big part of the patch notes that were delayed. So the main patch notes went live last Friday my time, might have been last Thursday yours. I did an extensive discussion of these Monday morning for many of you, and that is still available on the channel. But today, I wanted to take a look at this section, which is updates for the 22nd of July. Obviously, for many of you, this is still the 21st of July. This is mostly going to be focused on non-ailment damage over time. So what we mean by this is things that are not ignite, things that are not poison, but that do damage over time. The secondary damage from Exsanguinate is an example of this. There's the initial instant application damage that it does, that's one instant block of physical damage. Then there is damage over time that takes place after that. One thing I really need to mention here is that there is something very, very substantial that people need to know when assessing anything related to damage over time builds. And a lot of you probably know this, especially those of you watching this live, but because of coding limitations inside Path of Exile, there is a hard limit on the amount of damage over time that your character can do. This is 2 to the power of 31 damage per 60 seconds per minute, or as most people think of it, about 35-36 million damage per second. Once you start doing more damage than that, there's no benefit to gaining additional damage beyond that because it won't be applied to the enemy. The exception to this is that there can be some benefit if enemies have tremendous damage reduction. For example, your Uber Pinnacle bosses, typically there is a zone effect that causes them to suffer 70% less damage, and that 70% less damage is applied before the DOT cap. So if you've got 70 million damage per second on your character and you go up against the regular Maven, you'll be dealing effectively 35 and a bit million. But if you go up against the Uber Maven, you'll be dealing 21 million damage per second because of that 70% less damage per second, damage taken by bosses. Actually, I think the Uber Maven is 70%. One or two of them are different numbers, so it might not be exactly that amount, but that's the basic idea as to what's going on. So that's the damage over time cap. That's a very old programming limitation that was added to the game so much power creep ago that the idea that players might ever deal 2 billion damage per minute never, ever was considered to be a problem at all. So that is the damage over time cap, and you want to just have that in the back of your mind. It puts a limit on how high some of these things can be scaled. Now, I want to go through everything that's come up here, but the first thing is a very simple, very, very useful change. Add an optional keybind that can be used to return to your hideout. So this is essentially a keybind for /hideout as a command. This is fantastic. This is something that a lot of people had used third-party software to do, which was completely allowed. Grinding games allow you to use third-party software that modifies your inputs as long as one server action is tied to one command on your keyboard. So it was already allowed to use a third-party program to just, say for instance, have the F8 key be then used to type /hideout and then execute that, because that is one server command. But now you don't need to do that, and that's one of the things that I think will be quite welcomed by a lot of people. It's just a quality of life improvement, less of a need to use third-party programs there. After this, we have a change that's been made because of the Luminary. So the Luminary is a new style of play that's being added to the game. When the Scion was originally added, the Grinding Games wanted to make clear to new players, do not play this class, this is for advanced players only. And because of this, they didn't want to make it something that was like a top-end unlock either, but they just wanted to ensure that people didn't play a Scion as their first character, because the Scion is just objectively the worst of the characters early on. And so they then went and made it so that you had to beat Dominus once. And if you've beat Dominus once, especially back then, that used to take a bit longer than it does now, then you'd been playing the game long enough that you'd be able to muddle through. You'd have built up enough skill that you could muddle through with a Scion. Well, this is now considered to be a relic of 2013 or 2014 design, and it is no longer there at all. So that is something that is important to just keep in mind if you ever decide to start a new account, but mostly this is for people who are brand new to Path of Exile. Where most of my channel's viewers are very much solidly at endgame, so this is not going to affect you, but maybe just once in a blue moon, you'll set up a second account to store your guild on or something like that, And if you wanted to have a Scion on that, you can do it now. The Breach Stash tab, this exists for Path of Exile 2, where it's a bit more useful than it is in Path of Exile 1, but it's being added to Path of Exile 1 if you want it. So if you've already got it from Path of Exile 2, you'll be able to use it in 1. If you don't already have it for Path of Exile 2, if you've got no interest in Path of Exile 2, I would say probably not worth getting the Breach Stash tab. That's my first thought there. Now, during the campaign, temporary mercenaries can aid you in combat for multiple areas up to a maximum of 3. So there's a few spots throughout the game that you'll encounter a mercenary. You'll be able to fight them and they will come along with you for the ride. Now, these have been added in there because the Luminary wants them, but you can bring them along with you. This was something that they discussed in the original announcement of features for the League, but that they actually hadn't completed. So they thought they were going to get it in, but they might have had to walk back from that. And it is the case, though, that when you're in endgame maps, the mercenary is only coming with you for that map. So you're not going to be able to go, oh, let's go and get something before I then go and fight the Maven. No, you're going to have to do the Maven fight yourself. Rework the Abyss clusters on the Abyss passive tree in lieu of the combat changes made to Abyss. This is just something that they had already teased that they were doing this. They just hadn't mentioned it in the patch notes, so kind of not really that important. Reward icons no longer visible above monsters in the domain of timeless conflict. This is purely visual change, and you can exceed 300. You can exceed 300 reward icons. Although I think that might be because there's diminishing returns applied to these. I'm not even sure that the old 5-way services used to get there. Maybe that I'm not exactly certain how the unrelenting domain of timeless conflict worked there, but this may not come up very often. So you can go more than 300. It's just a visual limit at 300. Now, this is something I really like. Your stash tab that has the Breach Affinity set, womb gifts go in there, and your Genesis tree is able to use them. This one is fantastic. And this one actually might make the Breach tab feel a little bit better, but you can also just use the womb gift storage that exists that's not paid. So I think that's fine. Now, this one took a little bit of rereading until I actually understood what they were saying here. The Veldo map mod that causes players and their minions to deal 10% less damage per equipped item. This also applies to your mercenary and the mercenary's minions, but it is based upon the number of items the player has equipped, not the number of items that the Luminary's mercenary happens to have equipped. So that one's pretty significant there. And here we have something really interesting. 3 new keystones, all in the Witches area. These are essentially Avatar of Fire, but different. So for those of you that are familiar with Avatar of Fire, which is probably many of you, Avatar of Fire converts 50% of your physical cold and lightning damage into fire, but then renders you unable to deal non-fire damage, which means that there's a number of sources of damage that end up not really working all that well with it. Bit of Frost is interesting. This one grants quite a substantial amount of damage. It's like having Bone Chill support on all of your cold damage, pretty much. Presumably does stack with Bone Chill support, but that's got to be tested. And I will just give a link to people that are asking for these patch notes in chat. There's the there's the link to the notes. You'll have to scroll down in them if you're looking for the spot that we're at. This is right near the bottom of the notes. There's a section that's called updates for 2026-07-22. So this is really substantial. This upside is fantastic on it. And enemies in your chilling areas have damage taken increased by chill effect. And you cannot deal non-cold damage. Now, it's interesting, there is a different interpretation of this text that would make it absolutely broken. And that's basically to say that the enemies chilled by your hits have actually is part of the same clause as cannot deal non-cold damage. I think that this is just a weird wording that they've used, because actually that is technically the way that it's worded right now, but that is definitely not the way it's intended. This is a penalty to you that you cannot deal non-cold damage. And that's something that fits exactly with where everything is going there. So what is going to go on with this? Well, I think one thing you need to be aware of is that most explosions cannot do cold damage. So this is going to be sacrificing damage projection in order to deal more damage. And at some point, you will find that your mapping is limited by damage projection, not your capacity to deal damage to individual tough monsters. That can vary a bit with strategy, but that's a general rule of thumb. It is not impossible to get cold damage explosions. You can use something like Asenath's Gentle Touch, which deals physical damage explosion, and then you can convert that somehow into cold damage. Potentially, for example, you might start out with Harim Sorrow, the unique gloves, and take them into the domain of Timeless Conflict and get quite lucky and have them convert into Asenath's Gentle Touch. And if Harim Sorrow does convert 100% conversion, that's fantastic. But there are other ways to get 100% conversion as well. You can use a Hatred aura in conjunction with a Watcher's Eye. You can get 20% on the tree. 40% on the tree from a mastery, and then you just got to find some more somewhere else. So there's a lot of things you can do if you want to get cold damage explosions. The problem is that these are physical damage explosions in scale, and physical damage explosions are not the biggest explosions in the game. So you are definitely paying a very real price if you want to use Bitter Frost. It is a strong effect. It is going to be absolutely incredible when your cold damage over time build, like your Wintertide brand build or whatever it happens to be, when they end up going and taking on progression pinnacle bosses. So you go up against the big meat sack of hit points that is the Incarnation of Dread, which is the Voidstone boss I would recommend doing first if you can beat it first, because it makes all of the drops from all the other pinnacle bosses better to have the Incarnation of Dread Voidstone cleared. But if you can do that one first, do it first. But that's going to be a lot of hit points, and this will help you get through it. But at the same time, you are causing your ability to propagate damage through packs to go down. So that is Bitter Frost. A very, very powerful keystone. Don't let the drawback associated with it turn you off from this, especially because you can increase chill magnitude through various effects. This is effectively giving you the benefits of shock in addition to chill, is one way that you could think of this. Added a new Roiling Tempest Keystone passive skill to the north of the Witch's starting location. This grants 25% more maximum lightning damage, 50% less minimum lightning damage, and cannot deal non-lightning damage. Now, this one's interesting. There are certain circumstances where this is outright net detrimental. However, it is typically the case that the spread of damage on lightning skills is 20% to 180%. So in that case, 50% less is taking you down to 10%, 25% more is taking you up to 225%. This is a substantial buff. Additionally, this is an even better buff if you have lightning damage is lucky. If you have lucky lightning damage, then your 20 to 180%. The average damage when you're lucky is 20 plus 180 plus 180 on 3. That is 380 on 3. Let's call that 127%. And your average damage when you're going from 10 to 250 to 225 lucky is going to be 460 on 3, which is going to be 153. So you're going from 127 up to 153 if you are already lucky. That is not quite a 25% more multiplier. That's like a 22, 23% more multiplier. So if you are already lucky, this is huge. If you're not already lucky, it is still beneficial. However, of course, you've then got the drawbacks, which is that your only available explosions are going to be your ones that are causing you to do what do you call it? The lightning explosions from things like Foulball Merrick's Respite or from Impulse's Broken Heart. Now, Impulse's Broken Heart is a very squishy armor. It is a very strong armor, but it has a very real drawback of being basically no defense. And Foulball Merrick's Respite has a bunch of its power budget sort of tied up in other things that don't benefit you at all. So there's a lot of good stuff here, and like people are saying in chat, that volatility scales with this as well. So that's really, really strong effects. Do keep in mind, as people have said in chat, Stormfire builds, just no. Just no. You cannot deal non-lightning damage means that you are not igniting. And that is where I think the real danger is here. Like there's a lot of cool stuff that's going on with this, but it is build bricking for certain things. You only use this if you are doing solely lightning instant application damage, and it is better if you are doing lucky lightning damage. Once more, yeah, you can convert physical explosions. Actually, that's a good point. Like I mentioned that for cold, you can convert physical explosions to lightning as well. So you can use Asenath. Again, you've got to go through the same investment to do that, but it is definitely going to work. So thank you for people in chat for pointing that one out. After this, we have the Voracious Flame Keystone. This one is granting you can inflict an additional ignite on each enemy. Base ignite duration is 1 second. I've just got to check what the, I think it's 4 currently, isn't it? I'm just going to check that quickly. The ignite duration is currently, I'm just on the POE wiki having a look at that at the moment. And I was correct on that. Yeah, it was 4 seconds. So 1 second is like, this is a real drawback. You're dealing 25% less damage with ignite. So you need to sustain 2. And then if you're able to make this pay off, you're getting 50% more ignite damage. So that is really solid. But I feel like this is going to be one where the nature of ignite, you're not going to benefit that much from this. There'll be the odd situation where it's solid, and I'm not saying don't ever use this, but most of the strength of the ignite playstyle typically is hit once, then walk away. Now, you can use Cloak of Flame to countermand some of this effect, but the other drawback that comes up as well is that that some of the ways you propagate ignites really get hit hard by Voracious Flame. So let's start with proliferation of ignites. So this is effects like the Searing Exarch gloves that read, ignites you imply spread to enemies within 1.2 to 1.6 meters. 1.7 is the cap on those. If you've got this effect, then any enemy that you strike an ignite on, while it suffers from that ignite, it is going to deal that ignite's damage to everything within melee range of that enemy. So whatever melee range is, that can be 1.2, 1.7, depending upon the proliferation mechanic that you've got there. And this applies even if that enemy were to fall over dead, and then it becomes a corpse that is burning, but is still dealing that damage to everything within that radius. This propagation is really hammered hard by Voracious Flame, by 75% less ignite duration on enemies. So what this is going to mean is that your corpses that you ignite that would remain this area of instant death ground to any enemy that touches them, they are going to cease to be these areas of instant death ground. So for that reason, I'm very not sold on this effect. And then the second effect that you've got for spreading ignites is Beric's Respite, and also Abrath's Hooves have this. This is the text that reads, when you kill an ignited enemy, ignites on enemies you kill transfer to other enemies within 2 meters. It says nearby on the item, but it's 2 meters. This is something that also is going to get throttled by this, because what that does, when that enemy actually dies, then at that point, a copy of that ignite with its remaining duration left will be applied to all enemies within 2 meters. And the fact that it preserves that ignite duration ends up meaning that Beric's Respite type pseudo-proliferation is going to be really hammered as well by 75% less duration. I do think this is actually equivalent to just a change, like to changing base duration is equivalent to less duration, because less multiplies with everything. Just having a look if there's anything else. So I am generally very not sold on this. It will give you the best results in Path of Building. And I want to warn people about this. People often optimize for Path of Building. You can make your build look better in Path of Building by clicking this keystone if you're dealing ignite damage. However, or at least in most circumstances. However, it may well make it play much worse. So whatever you do, make sure that you give serious thought to this. If it wasn't 1 second duration, if it was, I think if this was 1.6 second duration, I probably wouldn't use it except with Cloak of Flame, but I would at least consider it. But 1 second is definitely there. For those of you that are looking for the patch notes, they are just in the patch notes. Just scroll down to the very bottom of the patch notes and expand the ones that have got today's time. So the ones that are date stamped the 22nd of July, because in New Zealand at least, and where I am for that matter in Australia, and actually now in most of Europe as well, it is the 22nd of July. Yeah. So they are there. They are there. So that's the Voracious Flame Keystone. I'm going to advise against taking this, or at least try this, but be willing to turn it off. Maybe click this on when you're doing bosses that stand still a lot, Turn it off when you're fighting a boss that doesn't stand still, because this is going to be miserable on bosses that might like jump out of the way of your skills. And it's less bad if you're using Cloak of Flame. It is worse if you are using Beric's Respite. It is worse if you're using Searing Exarch Gloves for proliferation or any other effect. I'm going to be playing Penance Brand Classic Penance Brand Ignite on Elementalist, I believe, and I am absolutely positively not taking this keystone. If I do use it, it will be for maybe just, I'll click it for Incarnation of Dread, then click off it, depending on how that works. Now we get to the spell buffs. So we're going to start with Bane. Bane is getting an extra 30 centimeters added to its radius. This is base radius, so that means that is going to scale well with Inc AoE. Bane builds do tend to scale AoE, so that actually is going to be even better than it looks. 100% increased debuff duration per curse applied, so the duration of Bane is going to be substantially better. And the amount of damage that it deals. Now, Bane was... I'm not going to call Bane the gold standard of dot skills. That was Fire Trap. Bane was the bronze standard. Bane was playable. Bane was also not very good. But it was very playable, and it's getting 16% more damage. It's getting substantially longer duration on it. This may be enough here. This may well end up being enough here. Just going back to Voracious Flame, like YouTube Sucks Now in the comments. I do love that name, but YouTube Sucks Now is commenting that with Penance Brand of Ignite or Penance Brand of Dissipation may ignite frequently enough to keep this up. That's possibly true on bosses, but I feel like you're going to be spreading damage through packs through other means, and your explosions are so important on Ignite builds. Anyways, Bane, I think this gets Bane into a point where it's a comfortable playstyle for easier content, but something that is going to fall off still when you're getting into hard stuff. The last time I played a Bane build was one of the Endless Delve events. I played an occultist variant of Bane, and it was like, it's very functional up to a certain point, but then you get to a point where the damage just isn't quite there. That's the difficult spot there. And yeah, people are pointing out, actually I agree, for Voracious Flame, for the uses we were talking about with Penance Brand, you do have to make sure everything is converted to fire, which is very hard. Because I don't believe that your lightning damage is going to inflict ignites at this point. So yeah, I'm just going back on this back to my original thoughts. This is a bad keystone with some fringe uses in general. This is like Avatar of Flame, actually. Avatar of Flame is bad on almost every build, but it has some fringe uses at certain points in progression. It is very, very good if you want to play an Ignite build early in progression, and then you want to get rid of it because you're going to gain some stray damage of other types later. So yeah, Bane, I think is just... I think this is like enough of a buff that people who already enjoy Bane cannot feel terrible about playing it, but not enough of a buff to make it into a strong thing. That's my first thought on it. So if you like it, then by all means play it. Bane of Condemnation is a tiny area, and I've just got to remind myself of what else Bane of Condemnation does. So I'm just bringing it up in the background on POE Wiki. So it has the summary here is that it's higher base chaos damage over time, more damage and increased duration per curse socketed, but the base radius and duration is lowered and has a slower cast time. So it's more, what's the cast time on it is 800 milliseconds compared to 600 on Bane. So essentially, it's the version of Bane that is for bossing. And I feel like if you're going to do bossing, like you might use Bane of Condemnation when you're doing your own bosses, but yeah, I don't think that this is... I would rather play the OG Bane and just focus on the fact that Bane is a better skill for dealing damage to, like for packs than it is for bosses. If you've got to do your own bosses because you're an SSF, then maybe this is something you might swap in there. The radius is tiny, so you're not going to be hitting packs with it. You can potentially use occultist explosions with it, but I don't think it's going to clear. This is not really a clear thing. You'll get a bunch of things here. Blight. Blight is getting an increase to base radius and damage. I am not sold on this. I feel like Blight, at least my impression of Blight, is that it's terrible in the game at the moment. And this takes it from terrible to still bad. That's my thought there. I could be wrong on that because I haven't played around with Blight for a long time. The last time I tried it, it just felt so awful that I was like, yep, nah, walking away from this. And that said, Blight of Atrophy is actually picking up much more meaningful bonuses here. Blight of Atrophy is getting a 25% more cast speed multiplier to it. That's actually really substantial. There's a couple of skills that are getting these big boosts here. Blight of Contagion does have a lot more damage, and so that's something to keep in mind, that this is now looking like it's... this one was already doing okay damage, and now it's getting an extra 15%, which is a pretty big deal on it. So base Blight of Atrophy are just... I don't think are there, but Blight of Contagion already was a serviceable skill, and it's something that's getting something pretty meaningful out of this. So keep that one in mind. Contagion's getting better as well, and this is something else to consider as a secondary thing. This goes with Essence Drain, and poor Essence Drain of Desperation. We'll come to that one later. Essence Drain of Desperation is going to take you out faster now because they've gone and buffed it, and this is the skill that you lose life based upon the amount of damage that it does. So it is now going to drain your life more aggressively than it did. So we'll get back to that one in a sec. But yeah, Blight of Contagion, definitely, it's getting a boost. It's getting a real boost. The radius is one of those things that it's like, it's so easy to understate how important that can be. And the fact that it's doing... yeah, 15% more damage on a skill that was already good. 15% more damage on a skill that wasn't already good is nothing, or maybe it's enough on Bane to bring it from definitely not good to serviceable but not great. But 15% more damage on something that's already solid is really substantial. Next we have Contagion. Like we said, this is getting radius buffs, which are enormous on this skill. This is one of the skills that scales the most with radius. This will come up as well with something in the base patch notes. So this has already been said in the previous live stream I did. Val Ice Nova got giga buffed in this patch, and that's because it's a skill that scales far more than you expect with any improvements to its radius, and it picked up really substantial buffs to its radius there. So Contagion is getting the same thing. 170 centimeters becomes 210 at gem level 20, might be 220 at gem level 21 as well. GGG often do that, and the damage that it does is now up by a little bit, but you're using Contagion mostly as a vector to spread other things. So Contagion, definitely, this one's actually more significant than it looks, because Contagion's purpose, its reason for existing, is to play around with stuff. And Tyrannia is commenting that you also get another 10 centimeters of base radius by having it in a blue socket. So your 20 quality is going to give you another 20 centimeters, but all of this means that where in the past you were looking at 190 centimeters radius, you're now looking at 240, maybe 250 at 2120. So yeah, lots of things that are stacking there to make this into a better gem than it was for its actual purpose, which is to be a vector to spread Essence Drain or other various effects like that. Contagion of Subsuming, I need to remind myself what this thing does. So this is Contagion of Subsuming. This is the one that has the... deals more damage over time, but loses a quarter of its damage over time each time it spreads. That's right. This is the one that sort of peters out really quickly over time. And this one is going to be quite a lot more damage on a single target, and also has all the other benefits. The fact that this actually is going to gain even more than base Contagion from the propagation effect, because you want this to propagate fewer times, and it's now going to be able to chain across screens a bit further before it propagates too many times. So that's something that's really significant. Each time it spreads is 3/4 the damage as before. So if it propagates 3 times, you're looking at about 42% of the base damage. And if it propagates, and even then, like 42% of this is still way more damage. So it's like it's the 5th spread. The contagion of subsuming gets worse. I think that this might actually be really substantial here. So definitely give this one some thought here. This is, I think Contagion of Subsuming is a quiet achiever here because that radius is also double dipping on the effect. Contagion of Transference. This is the one that is this. I'm just going to bring up these. So many of these I haven't seen since Affliction League. This is the one that spreads when the enemy... so it's slower cast time, higher cost, deals more damage over time, larger area of effect, and it is spread on the enemy being hit. So it's easier to spread, and it is something that then... it propagates a bit more, but it is 850 milliseconds versus base contagion is 600. Mana cost is moderately more, but not crushingly more. I feel like you probably want to use one of Subsiding or Transference. Like both of these are good, and Transference is like honestly looking really good now. At least that's my first thought. I think that actually all of the contagion options are looking good, and given that Essence Drain is getting a big chunky buff, it's not a small one. It's getting a chunky boost. I feel like the old Essence Drain contagion setup may actually be doable again, especially if you're playing it on an Elementalist. Elementalist will just get access really, really early to damage over time multiplier and to unconditional damage increase to get yourself started really well. Oh, Tyranneer is pointing out that Contagion of Transference, you actually don't get very many hits with Chaos Dot. So maybe that's the reason that that it looks so good. Thank you for pointing out that looks like I was misjudging that. Of course, a lot of your skills, okay, yeah, forget everything positive I said about Contagion of Transference. Not saying it can't be made to work, but it doesn't fit the base outline. Yeah, forget everything that I was saying about that. I said positive things about it. I take them back. You could possibly make this work, but there's some cool stuff that's coming up in there. But Subsiding, I think, is the one that excites me the most there. You just got to be ready to restart this. So Contagion of Subsiding, it's going to do a lot of damage when you first hit something, which is actually really good because you can just cast it on something that's unusually tanky, and then you can also spread it through and just deal with all the weaker enemies. So this one's the one that I think is probably the winner here. Baseline Contagion, though, has the base effect. It's good too. Corrupting Fever. This thing has been played for a while, actually. Corrupting Fever has been one of those quiet achievers. The Fizz Dot archetype is getting explosive buffs. This is the first of them, but there's also Reap, there's also Exsanguinate. They're getting huge boosts at gem level 20. Huge boosts at gem level 20. So this was already playable, and it's something that, like, it propagates damage incredibly well. It does hit a brick wall for the amount of damage it can do. This is not a Pinnacle Bosser, much less an Uber Pinnacle Bosser. You can do your own Pinnacle Bosses on it, but they're difficult. But this is a very, very, like, it's one of those playstyles that you need to find a lot of ways to apply hits to enemies. But as long as you can apply a lot of hits to enemies on an automated way, and basically that generally means corpse explosions, then it can do some really cool stuff. Death Aura. Death Aura, I want to warn people, this has historically been a tier 3 rarity unique. This might not be a tier 3 rarity unique anymore. This is getting a lot of boosts here. A lot of boosts here. So this is going to be going from 1250 to 1600. That is a 28% more multiplier. So that's basically almost an additional support gem. But why do I call this a lot of buffs? Well, Death Aura is from Death's Oath. It's actually very hard to color this in the past. So you would have to get a Death's Oath. You'd have to six socket it. You'd have to corrupt it, and then you would have to apply tainted chromes until you hit something that was like 4/1/1 was typical colors, and so it wasn't particularly out of the question, but it wasn't the easiest thing in the world. Nowadays, every socket is default to white, and sometimes you get lucky and you get something better than that. So Death Aura is just used for propagating damage through packs and for clearing. It is not a boss skill at all, but I do think that this is exactly what it needs it. It's getting quite a big boost here. It's something that gets going fast, and I think it's like people are comparing it to Righteous Fire and saying RF is better. RF also requires you to build in a certain way to make it work, whereas Death Aura just works. It's something that people have definitely played a lot in the past, and they're playing it like this is not something you want to play on the hardest content in the game, but if you're wanting to do really brain off farming of middle difficulty content or easy content, and there are a number of strategies that are really good in easier maps, Death Aura is really good for that. I think this is going to see a lot more play, but it may end up being something that you've got to then just be careful about how exactly you set it up. And yeah, there are a bunch of shenanigans things. It's this is something that you want to run through. You want to run this through content where your goal in that content is not to juice up the power of the monsters and the drops per monster. It is to juice up the number of monsters. Like this would be something that would be good with if Abyss ends up being quite lucrative, which we shall see. And yeah, definitely pay attention to the implicits that come up as well. Energy Blade. I am curious what the specific nerf here is targeted at. Can only be used if all equipped weapons are swords. And I'm just trying to think, like you could have that thing where Energy Blade has had this weird interaction with Abyss socket items in the past. But I don't think there's anything substantial that I'm not seeing anything that this is particularly nerfing, unless it's like Energy Blade attack with skills that are specific things. Oh, 6-socket Abyss Axe. Yep, that's it. That is it. There is a new Abyss new Abyss unique item. It is an axe that has 6 sockets in it. That is the reason for Energy Blade getting that change. Yep. Thank you for that clarification. That took me a bunch of thinking. It was like, oh, what is it? Nah, that's an axe. Okay. The thing that comes up here is that Energy Blade does not turn off the effects of Abyss sockets, which I think most people know by now, but it's just worth being aware of. So that is the only reason they're doing this. Obviously, as people are saying in chat, shields are very strong, so it's all good. Essence Drain. Essence Drain is getting a substantial buff to the damage over time component, which is the reason you're using it. This is about 30% more damage. That is a lot. And keep in mind that like all of these Chaos Dot spells, they tend to get used on the same build. So whether you're using Death Aura or not is an open question, but the Blight potentially, but definitely Contagion and Essence Drain, they get used together. They're all getting similar buffs here. The instant application component is actually getting a nerf. This is completely irrelevant in most circumstances. But this is big. Yeah, Essence Drain, Contagion. I feel like this is back on the agenda now. Like Contagion's way better than it was. Lots and lots of stuff there. Now we have the bad Essence Drain, but people are saying that this does work through proxies. So this is the Essence Drain of Desperation. I had to look this one up. Where is it? It's a couple of pages back. Essence Drain of Desperation. This thing, I had to look up just how bad it was. Now, the way that this works, it works like Essence Drain, except if it hits a lot of enemies, you lose life and energy shield equal to 0.3% of the debuff damage as it applies on your tooltip. So if you're dealing a million damage per second with this skill, then this is going to be 3,000 life per second that you are losing. if you're applying this to one target. But if you muck up and you accidentally apply Essence Drain of Desperation to 16 targets, then you are losing 48,000 life per second. This is life loss. It is not chaos damage suffered, therefore it gets through your chaos inoculation, should you be chaos inoculation. So that part of it is bad. However, you can do something with it, which is applying this in conjunction with proxies. Totems typically aren't used with it, but traps can work with it. There's traps and mines are the options, but traps are the superior one because you've got access to trap and mine support. And I think that the mine effects have more serious drawbacks on them. I'll just confirm that though. Trap support is how much of a loss is this? Yeah, supported skills have 6% less trap damage, whereas a mines it's much more serious. So that is the purpose of this. If you wanted to make this work, Essence Drain of Desperation, you have to use it. You have to use with traps, but that's the thing. One thing that's come up in chat there that's interesting is that Decay was left out. I'll answer why Decay is left out. They have buffed Stormburst, and there is some weird interactions between Stormburst and Decay. But essentially, as long as Stormburst has that interaction with Decay, Decay cannot be buffed because that thing is explosively good. Corrupting Cry is something that, Corrupting Cry was already good. I think that's the reason they're doing that. And now, Exsanguinate. Exsanguinate is getting a substantial boost here as well. This is 30% more damage. This was already a good skill, and it's getting 30%ed. Slightly more than 30% actually, I think. Isn't it? Oh, hang on, no, sorry. It's 25%. 24%. Still, this is already a good skill. This is already widely used. Now, keep in mind that what they're doing here as well, there have been some nerfs to mines. And Exsanguinate has often been played in conjunction with Reap as mines. And I think that they're not really addressing that those are worse because the instant application component is not getting it there. So this is the Exsanguinate. There has definitely been a damage over time version of this. So basically the version of this that was doing instant application damage doesn't gain, but the version that was doing dot damage is getting quite a bit out of this. POE. No, just that's the thing there. I keep looking over, do I? I haven't actually. I wasn't actually intending to. I'm looking at the screen because I'm like, my camera is slightly unaligned from where the text is. So my camera is slightly above the center of my screen. That's why things are going up there. This is a really interesting one that people are saying this is actually going to make the mercenaries a lot scarier to fight. And that is going to be the case. But I do think there have been builds that have been doing the fizz dot scaling. So Exsanguinate of Transmission are gaining something real out of this. But it's not for the mainstream builds. It's for some of the secondary things people do with them. Flame Wall. So I do not think Flame Wall is going to get buffed early game. If people are wondering, like, what we're getting is the level 20 stats. I wouldn't be surprised if this is actually getting made worse early game. But Flame Wall is very, very, very strong in the early game and then falls off really hard. It's not unusable. It's never been unusable. It gets used in conjunction with Spellslinger sometimes, but not really much for a long time. But that's something that's definitely getting made better than it was. But I'm not sold that I want this at endgame still. The additional Flame Wall. The additional maximum number of Flame Walls is substantial, especially given that as soon as you get a single blue gem, you can use it early game. So that's really substantial. But scaling past 20 is probably better than this as well. They've said that is generally a goal they're going for, but I don't know that. I think Flame Wall felt too far behind the times I've used it. I have used it on certain builds in the past just because I had the socket available and I could get something out of it versus nothing otherwise, but it never felt very, very strong late game. Reap, again, Reap has two ways that it's being used. It's being used for instant application builds. They don't gain anything out of this. And it's being used for dot builds. Dot builds gain quite a bit out of this. This is a 21% boost, which is not small, and this is going to be a welcome thing there. Scorching Ray. Scorching Ray is getting a Giga buff. Now, there was a period, people may have forgotten this, there was a period when people used other things than Fire Trap on Righteous Fire builds. I don't know if we're quite getting there with this, but we might be. Fire Trap is numerically quite a bit better than Searing Bond and Scorching Ray at the moment. Scorching Ray, I think, has a higher optimum case scenario, but Scorching Ray is also very, very unreliable. Fire Trap also has the ability, particularly for the Chieftain versions of Righteous Fire, the initial hit from it can propagate really good ignites through packs as well. So this is something that is getting quite a substantial amount of boosting here. The cast time improvement on this is actually massive. So one of the biggest problems you got with Scorching Ray is it's really good on paper, but in the real world, you're not getting your 8 stacks on monsters very often at all. You're now going to be able to get 8 stacks on monsters a bit more realistically. And so you're looking at here, this is approximately, how much of an improvement is this? Sorry, just doing some numbers in my head. Just under a 14% more multiplier to cast speed. And at the same time, the damage over time component is going up by 130. That is from 6 times to 7 times. So that's like a 17% more damage multiplier as well. This is what Scorching Ray needs. I feel like it is probably at least serviceable as an alternative to Fire Trap now, but I would probably still play Fire Trap the way that I play Righteous Fire because I am absolutely addicted to propagating ignites. So that's not something that will go through there. It does do a lot of damage for Elementalist versions of Righteous Fire, but I would not be playing Elementalist Righteous Fire in general, because, I mean, Righteous Fire's entire strength is not its single target, which is where Elementalist goes. You're basically sacrificing your god tier feature of the build of Righteous Fire, which is damage propagation through ignites. You're sacrificing that in order to become a mediocre bosser. Whereas the Chieftain one, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to buy a carry through my own Maven and maybe even my own Incarnation of Dread, but in exchange for that nuisance, I'm then going to have the best damage propagation in the game. I think this is Hinakora's explosions are just like, even before they got buffed in 328, even before that they were probably more than the entire Elementalist Ascendancy going to Righteous Fire. And then you've got also the defensive aspects of Chieftain, which are no joke, and have good synergy with Righteous Fire as well. Scorching Ray of Immolation. And now has a base duration of 4 seconds, previously 3, and has substantially better damage. So I've got to bring this one up. This is one that I remember looking at way back in 3.23 and then forgetting it exists. So sacrifices fire exposure, gains less damage per debuff stage, but it deals more damage and has increased duration and faster cast time. So the additional debuff stages add 10% versus the baseline version, which is additional debuff stages add 80%. So if you were to maximize this out, you're going to go to 1.7 times this, which is going to be in the low 4,000s, versus OG Scorching Ray is going to be way, way, way higher than that. But that's only if you max it out. Scorching Ray of Immolation, definitely better if you can only get a quick burst off. And so that's something that's, yeah, sweep over a crowd quickly rather than staying for long. This is something that I feel is like, Immolation is more about putting it on totems. Okay, yeah, I could see that because it'll sweep around, yeah. Basically, Scorching Ray of Immolation is something that it's like, it's doing more damage. It's doing more damage than it was, but I feel like I'm more inclined to go with baseline Scorching Ray. You're only going to use Scorching Ray against individual targets that are quite hard targets. Like soft targets, you're not going to use it. And Scorching Ray of Immolation excels at soft targets. Searing Bond. Searing Bond was worse than... I did actually play Searing Bond Righteous Fire in 322. Fire Trap is better, but Searing Bond is playable already. And now it's getting substantially better again. You need to get extra totems on it, but Searing Bond came with enough totems just from quality already, so you don't really need all of the extra totems. You do have enough coverage from that because you're only really casting this against tankier monsters. The main thing that you're getting here, though, is that the damage over time on this is getting... The gap is closing with Fire Trap. In fact, this might even put it past it. The problem that you'll face if you do experiment with Searing Bond as a build, as a Righteous Fire alternative to Fire Trap, Searing Bond doesn't hit, so it can't imply ignites, which means it's got less synergy with the Chieftain setup. And on top of that, Searing Bond is not quite, just not quite as good at being applied quickly. However, Searing Bond of Detonation is also getting boost. And this one can apply ignites. So this is something, if you're wanting to mess around a bit with something that is like Righteous Fire but different, Searing Bond of Detonation, you should definitely be aware of that as an option there. That's something that's definitely good to see. I love seeing Shack Central in chat. Shack Central had a guide to Cold Dot Occultist that was really good for a long time, and we haven't really got to much of the Cold Dot stuff, but there's definitely some big boosts there. Balbo was pointing about that Fire Trap Ignite did catch a 2 gem level nerf a while ago. It's still enough. It is like the Ignite is the best part of it, but the persistent damage from the ground is actually still very alive. Very alive there. Siphoning Trap of Pain, I have no experience with this. I feel like this is something that was regarded as a meme by a lot of people beforehand, and you don't go from meme skill to functioning skill just by a 20% buff. I don't think this gets there unless we're just very wrong about how good this is. And just clarifying, the things that can ignite are the fire traps, not Searing Bonds. So that's the comparison. But Searing Bond and Detonation can ignite. This has a hit component. So yeah, Siphoning Trap of Pain is single target is non-existent, is what people are saying about it, which I'll believe that. Kind of got to mess around with it, but the increased number of targets, it may make it better for clearing. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. Soul Rend, cast time 700 milliseconds. This is miles better than 800. The damage over time has gone up substantially. Base mana cost has been decreased. You know what this is missing? This is missing additional projectiles. The problem with Soul Rend is that you have to invest in additional damage additional projectiles somewhere. And the ways of doing that all come at substantial less, the cost of substantial less multipliers. I do not think that this is enough here. So I'm just not completely convinced that Soul Rend is getting there. Even with this, it has needed a boost. It's getting one, but I feel like other stuff has gotten buffed more. And like maybe if you need this as your 6th link to supplement the 4-link bane damage, maybe, but it's something that feels like it's generally speaking getting a bit better. So Alpha POE is mentioning that Soul Rend has been used with GMP from coins, but coins aren't going to exist. Yeah, that's an example of something where you've got to pay a big tax to use it, because even when you did have the option of imprinting GMP from a coin, that meant that you were not getting something else on that coin instead. Like, it was still a support gem, but the fact that that support gem was only level 1 meant that because damage over time is not nerfed by the less damage multiplier on GMP, so it's something that is getting I think in general, Soul Rend is actually in a worse place than it was in Mirage, because in Mirage you had that ability of getting a lower opportunity cost source of damage of extra propagation there. Soul Rend of the Spiral, this is getting a chunk more damage per second as well. It's still low. It is Soul Rend of Reaping that is the one that I'm more excited by. That is not a today buff, and it's not a damage over time buff. That's the one that gained the extra projectiles built in. It went from 1 projectile to 5, I believe, at high level. That's something that's kind of cool. So there's a bunch of things that are getting changed here. We do also have this gore support, which we've just got to... We need to see the details on that. That's going to be one that... well, when I say support, it's not a support, it's an active skill gem, but it's something that is going to provide you a single spellcast that's going to be god tier, but in exchange for suffering an affliction afterwards. And we don't know how bad those afflictions are. That's going to really take some playing around with to get a sense as to how it's going to feel. More damage is great, but more damage that comes at the expense of you then not being able to get out of the way of a boss slam or something like that may end up not being worth it. We've just got to test it. I'm keeping an open mind on all of those new supports that are linked to beta and the like, but I've got to see them in practice. We don't have 2020 gem versions on them. Stormcall of Trathus. So this is the one that leaves bad ground behind. This is now getting a boost of 30 centimeters in radius, which is big on a dot skill. Effectiveness of added damage for the initial instant application damage is getting boosted. In fact, yeah, the instant application damage is just getting a flat, like 6% boost or so. And the physical damage per second is getting a lot more than 6%. This is 20%. This is getting a 20% boost, or maybe like 18 or 19%. Stormcall of Trathus, I would really need to see how this goes. This one I've not played, and I just don't know if it's any good. We're going to get to one of the juicier ones very soon, though. Storm Cascade. This is triggered by the Surging Thoughts unique sword. This now has a base critical strike chance that is basically 20% more crit than it used to have. Effectiveness of added damage is way better. And essentially this sword, like, this was always getting vended for a fracturing shard. It's probably still always getting vended for a fracturing shard, but at least there's something interesting about it there. And Wintertide Brand, though. Wintertide Brand has been something people have been playing. This is like very good in the early game, but falls off hard in the late game. It's incredible damage propagation early on, and the base debuff duration being 2 seconds is big. The base cold damage per second is getting like 30%ed on a skill that was already playable. I feel like this is huge. Wintertide Brand is huge here. But the big question is, when does this damage come online? If this damage comes online when your character is like, only is it like level 65 or so, or maybe even higher than that, with like if it's tied to high gem levels, it's not nearly as good. If it's something that comes online early in Wintertide Brand, because they did say on the Q&A that they are very conscious of that some skills need a boost late and not early, and Wintertide Brand feels like it's one of those. It's debuff rather than the attached duration on the duration. Let me just bring up the exact details on that. Someone's just mentioning that it's... So the debuff deals 20% more damage per stage. This is when removed, a short duration debuff dealing the same damage per time and chill is applied to each nearby enemy. So that is the lingering component. That is the lingering component. That is when it falls off, when the brand falls off and goes to somewhere else. Wintertide Brand it's very good early and falls off hard late. It's just going to come down to whether this gives it options to scale late or not. And I think it's a sort of skill that currently it's good up to, but not including the Guardians of the Phoenix and similar tier of bosses, I think. At least that's my understanding of the skill. I could be wrong on that because I haven't played it for a while. Val Reap is interesting. This is getting an additional usage that it can store, which is actually really substantial on this skill because people use it for bossing, and it allows you to maintain your charges more effectively on bosses. Then we've got the soul gain prevention is 6 seconds rather than 8. This is a substantial improvement again for bosses. If your boss is going to take quite a while to kill, you're going to start regaining souls earlier, and that's really good. The effects of boiling blood now linger for 4 seconds, previously 2. That's more damage over time effectively. And the dot that it does is also quite a bit better. Again, this comes down to what you're using Vile Reap for. If you're using it to empower the instant application component of your Reap skill, it is achieving nothing. If you're using it to empower Reap mines, these buffs do not very much. It's a little bit because you can store 2 uses now. But again, the soul gain prevention of 6 seconds is still actually going to be enough to, it's still going to be really impactful. But if you're using it for the DOT component, then that's getting a bit better. Frigid Bond is next. Frigid Bond is a link skill, so I don't think we even really need to say anything about it. And I mean, they keep trying to make this better, and maybe actually no, maybe with the Luminary, maybe Frigid Bond can work. So the Luminary allows you to link to a mercenary and actually provides you real benefits for doing so. And so maybe there will be a mercenary build that uses the mercenary to do most of the killing, but for stray monsters that come close to you as the player, Frigid Bond is there. That's my thought there. This could be intriguing. Frigid Bond, from memory, I think the scaling on this is really weird, and I just got to check that. Let me just see if do we have over level scaling on this? Frigid Bond support. Is it only POEDB that has over? No, it does have it here. So I think from memory, the scaling was historically ludicrous at high gem level. So this is something for Forbidden Shaco. Most gems do not quintuple their damage from level 20 to 35. So I want you to pay attention to this. If Grinding Gear Games decide to make Frigid Bond go to the moon, you might find that a Luminary might use this in conjunction with a link setup and just use it on a Forbidden Shaco and deal ludicrous damage to anything that comes close to them. So that's the reason I'm saying that. Yeah, the Luminary, one of the mods prevents you from dying when your linked mercenary dies. You still die if another linked target dies. And the Forbidden Shaco can get you a lot of gem levels on that. It's silly. I think it is pure silly, but definitely think about it. Links don't really have many supports anyway, so this would be Forbidden Shaco. You would be putting in your link. You'd have Frigid Bond built into the Shaco, and then you'd be going for 3 other support gems that are cold dot related supports. But yes, you've got to get the Shaco for that. That's going to be Trade League exclusive. Infernal Legion, so this is usually used with Skitterbots, and it's not used all that often with Skitterbots, but it does work, and it's now better than it was, but it's also kind of an increase in mana reservation. Most people don't want this, but just be aware that it's an option. After this, we have a bunch of changes that are coming up to items, and these are important ones. So Searing Touch was not very good, but it has a Foulborn version that's kind of funny with Searing Bond Totems. The main thing to note here is that it now has Voracious Flame, which is that keystone for Ignite. Remember that keystone is actively bad for most builds. So this means that Searing Touch is going from a maybe I will use this because I don't have anything better staff to this is a very build around item. And it's probably worse for most people. I think most people don't want the Searing Touch now, even for that period in progression that you might have used it before when you didn't have a good weapon yet. But rare staves are better than they used to be. And that's actually the biggest caster buff of all, is what's happening with rare staves. So Searing Touch, it's going to be easier to get something that's better than Searing Touch. But you also have this as an option if you actually want Voracious Flame and you're not near it. Searing Touch is just, it's outscaled. Like the current version of Searing Touch has been outscaled by stuff. So that Ignite Keystone is very, very, very narrow. It is, the vast majority of people will never want it, but I actually like keystones like that. There's something that you're not thinking, oh, how do I get this into my build? It's kind of like Acrobatics. It's like Acrobatics is actively bad for most people who are right side builds, but there are times that people want it. The Squire no longer has all sockets are white because that's detrimental. Existing versions not affected. Foulborn Squire will now replace the 3 to 5% chance to block a modifier when rolling ignore attribute requirements of socketed gems. So that's Oh yeah, ignore attribute requirements. Yeah, that's fine. Imperfect Memories. This was one of the divination cards that was granting you a synthesized item. The designer of that has obviously reached out to Grinding Gear Games and has managed to get it changed. It will now grant a random Astrolabe. This will be interesting to see how rare Astrolabes are considered to be by GGG. So definitely pay attention to what the gold cost is on trading this. Someone's mentioning that Grinding Gear Games have dropped the filter info. I will definitely have a look at that in a sec. We're getting quite close to the end of this. There's a couple of things that are Ruthless specific. This was not originally tagged as Ruthless specific when this patch notes update went through. So there were a couple of people panicking about this, thinking that this applied to the base game, that Gladiator in the base game was getting nerfed. Ruthless specifically, they're nerfing 2 of the Gladiator's block nodes. Runes of the Searing Exarch in Originator maps of low level were not dealing any damage. I did not realize that. That's kind of funny. And fix a bug where temporary minions could persist through area transitions between non-combat areas. So this is something about the transitions for your mercenaries. That's not intended for them to be able to do that. After this, there's a number of other things that have been added here. Unhallowed Rite is a new notable. This is requiring either Vile Bastion or Forbidden Power. So this is on the Occultist. This has been changed. So this is not exactly what it used to be. The change here is that it is only draining a stack from you if you've not gained a stack in the last 4 seconds. This is substantially better than what was teased before. Substantially better. This is miles better. And that's going to be, yeah, that's really important to note there. This was dead on arrival before. This is now maybe usable. The reason that this matters is that you're gaining your Spirit Infusion each second while channeling a spell, but if you channel for 0.9 seconds, which is actually quite a while to channel, you are not gaining a charge, and therefore you are getting closer to the moment of losing charges. And I think this is now usable on Winter Orb. I still think it's probably the worst notable you'll take on Winter Orb, but it is something that you could consider going with. So this is definitely much better. And it's also been changed where it passes through as well. So Unhallowed Rite now passes through Vile Bastion and Forbidden Power instead of Profane Bloom and Unholy Authority. Okay, I didn't realize it was that. I always thought that it was coming through that way because that's where it was obviously tied to. This is very much tied to the cold area of the tree, I feel, in thematically. So it's more sensibly there. Anyways, I feel like this is like gone from dead on arrival to marginal with this. Cold Snap is next. Cold Snap now has is getting a bunch of buffs that are moderate, but not all that much. And next we have Creeping Frost. So Creeping Frost is getting better and worse at the same time. It is getting worse for the builds that were likely to use it. It is getting better for builds that were not previously using it. So there was a setup people were considering with Winter Orb, Castwell Channeling, and Creeping Frost. This one is, or a bunch of other things that people could do. Basically, Creeping Frost is not going to be used on those builds anymore. This is not going to be used on this. The dot component is better, but the builds that were most excited to play around with Creeping Frost were all about the instant application component. So basically, this is having a change of this skill is having a change of its general, what you call, identity. Its identity is now more of a dot skill and less of a hit skill. And that's important to keep in mind because a lot of people were planning it with were planning to play it differently. The boost to criticals on this is not sufficient to make up for it as well. Like if you're playing this as a hit, with the hit component, the boost to criticals is real, but it is not going to be enough to make this into a hit skill. Creeping Frost of Flows. This is also getting the same treatment, I believe, pretty much. It's just looking at... Yeah, this is basically exactly the same changes. It's like pretty much more of the same as base one. Next we have the Flame Dash here. Flame Dash now has a worse critical strike chance because that's just the identity of fire skills. I don't think they're doing this because they want to nerf one person's ignite crit Flame Dash build. They're doing this just because they've got a particular identity in mind for fire skills, and the damage over time of it is better, but no one cares because if you're using Flame Dash, you're using Flame Dash because it is a Frostblink alternative for movement. Flame Dash is sometimes better than Frostblink, but usually worse, and this changes nothing about that. If you are scaling fire damage over time on your build, then Flame Dash is fine to use. You will find that it is slightly worse movement-wise than Frostblink is, but it is still very much good enough, and it has its own nuances, but the main thing is that it leaves Burning Ground, and Burning Ground is something that will help you if you're already doing that damage. Ice Storm is now 60% better at crashing your PC, and also it's 60% more damage to your GPU, and also it has 25% chance more of doing critical damage to your GPU. Seriously, Ice Storm, unless they've improved this at some point, do not get baited into using this, not because the skill is bad. The skill might actually be all right now, but because the amount of heat that it will cause your GPU to put out will be something that will, like, even if it's winter where you are, it's still going to be absolutely horrible. So yeah, basically this is something that is there's something they'd already said they were changing, and like it's just unless they fix the performance problems with this, you just do not play it. Every time that you get this Ice Storm staff, you take it to Rog and you say, "Hey Rog, I'd like you to disenchant this so I'm not tempted to play it." And yeah, it is like, especially with a maximum of 8. Now, if anyone wants to be a troll though, if you make a really, really invulnerable character and then you start cast while channeling Ice Storm or just spamming Ice Storm via other means, you go and join public parties. You can really, really, really wreck things with that. I'm telling you here how to be antisocial though, so I'll stop doing that. Lightning Warp. Cast time is now 600 milliseconds down from 700. This was already in the patch notes, but the base mana cost has been increased. Critical strike chance has been increased. So keep in mind, Lightning is getting this new identity of faster and more of a mana drain, which is something that is going to require you to build differently. If you want to play Lightning skills, you are going to have to drop 1 reservation. You're going to have to use a mana flask, and that is going to be the default. But in exchange for this, you drop off your Bottle of Faith that you were using previously. You replace it with a mana flask, and not an enduring one. You need a real one that has real throughput on it. But you do that, and then your payoff for doing that is going to be that you will get all the damage benefits you were getting previously from Bottle of Faith built into the skills themselves. So yeah, that's the thing that you can do there. Use Ice Storm to punish people who landmine trades. I like that. Griffin has a really good idea there. Yeah, if you see a landmine, if you see someone doing trade landmining, then set up a whole bunch of Ice Storms in their hideout before you leave when they come back from a map. But yeah, so that's Lightning Warp for you. Lightning Warp gains a lot from being faster to cast. We'll say that. This movement skill, like there are people who have been doing shenanigans with it for a long time. It's genuinely very good, and the base mana cost I don't think is very high on it. I just want to confirm that. I think it's like Lightning Warp. It was 9 to 26 actually does scale up pretty high, but you do want it to be at high level. So it's manageable. It is definitely a solid skill. It is getting better, but it's getting better at the same time as causing you a new problem to solve with it. And so you'll have to work out whether it's worth it or not. The main thing though with Lightning Warp, everyone that I know of that has farmed Uber Shaper has done so using Lightning Warp as their primary locomotion through all of the massive area in there. And like really farmed it. I'm not talking about just doing it a couple of times. I'm talking like going until you get 5 Sublime Visions. Also, fun fact, speaking of Uber Shaper, I went and did some challenges at the end of 328 Mirage League. I was like, I should do double Uber Elder and Uber Shaper, and because there was a challenge to kill 5 of the Uber Pinnacle bosses. And when I did double Uber Elder, I got terrible loot from it. But when I killed Uber Shaper, I got a Sublime Vision from Uber Shaper from one run, which was kind of funny. Anyways, Vortex. Vortex is faster to cast by a lot. Its crit chance is getting buffed, and it has a chance to freeze. This is the cold identity. Base mana cost has been reduced by quite a substantial chunk. Now it has a base radius that's larger, and it deals substantially more base cold damage per second. It's worth noting that Vortex has at one point had an Ignite build based around it, so it's not something that you can only use in conjunction with cold damage, but it is usually done for the cold dot effect. Everything about Vortex is miles better. Miles better. And this is something where Shaq Central, who is in chat, will definitely be excited to see this. Very, very solid improvements. But Vortex is still not back to the Golden Era. The Golden Era, it had an instant cast time and a cooldown instead of being a cast time that's now a bit shorter than it was. This is definitely going to be better than it was, but it's definitely not at the level that it was when it was at its best. Vortex of Projection, I think everything is the same, is just getting the same boost here as Vortex is. Just looking if there's anything else that's not exactly the same. It's everything about that is the same, including the rough proportion of the damage. Actually, no, the damage the damage over time is getting a larger buff on projection, but I think Vortex was the better skill, so Vortex is getting more out of it. And Val Cold Snap can now store 2 uses, previously 1. Souls per use of 25 rather than 35. Soul Gain Prevention 5 seconds rather than 6. Cast time of 800 milliseconds down from 850. Crit buffed. Everything about Val Cold Snap is buffed. And it's worth noting, this was already good. Like, Val Cold Snap was already something that cold dot builds were using, and it's just gotten a substantial boost there. So again, this is something for Shaq Central. Definitely something that's a big improvement. Terran Shiva. Terran Shiva is gaining Bitter Frost. Now, it's worth noting that Terran Shiva was already announced as having 2 to 4 to the level of all cold spell skills. So that was a previously announced change. I think it's just that it's getting Bitter Frost added. That's the part that's new on this. Terran Shiva is going to be better as long as you can deal with that Bitter Frost keystone. So this is really, really solid. People asking what I'm leaning towards playing this league. I will quickly mention something that I was thinking of doing in a sec. I just want to refresh this because one thing that does tend to happen is that sometimes more gets added. I'm just looking for anything that is obviously added. Now, it doesn't look like nothing is obviously being changed since the Gladiator nerfs were clarified, that the Gladiator nerfs are intended only for Ruthless players. So it doesn't apply to everyone else. I also wanted to go to the homepage, and people have mentioned that the item filter information is up. We'll have a quick look at this now as well. New keywords, Vestigal, yep, we know about that. New items. So Scrying Orbs should not be stackable currency, should they? They're tied to the map that they're from. That's really interesting that they're there. We have all the enshrouding crystals. We knew about those. Decats, we don't know what they do. Dead Man's Sulfur, this is something that is used up for the new crafting method. Message in a Bottle, these seem to be RNG things. One was shown that gives a Reflecting Mist. I note that Reflecting Mists are getting nerfed in this league. A lot of people aren't aware of this. Reflecting Mists are going to be more common and less powerful than they used to be. And the RNG Reflecting Mist jewelry is going to be the best that you can get. It always was in theory, but in practice it wasn't in general. I think now that the RNG mists might actually feel a bit better than they did before. So Scrying Orb is meant to remember the map that it's found in. That's my understanding, because there is a cluster that's, at least the way the patch notes are structured, and I'm just going to check this actually. So Divination, it's not that reference to it. It's... The scrying orb is a new currency item that stores the map the currency item was found in. It then allows you to scry the divination cards of the map area listed on the item to a map on your atlas. So you would need to have, say, a Basilica-specific scrying orb. And that kind of runs against it being a stackable currency there. I am not sure what exactly is going on with this. And Ducats, yep, so basically that's all that we've got there. News, skill gems, mana infused stuff, we know. The packs we have seen, but we don't know full details of. Holy Sweep of Hammerfalls, Reap of Butchery, Divine Blast of Radiance, Holy Hammer of Spirals. I think we knew about all of those already. Costing Current support, Crystal Fall support, we knew about these as well. We did not know the numbers on them. All the Triathlon Scarabs and Mercenary Warrants were known. Zorath's Eyes were not known, but presumably this is 4 pieces that you put together into the map device. So I'm assuming that this is basically this league's equivalent of how you access the Shaper fight. That's my first thought there. So Cardia Darkhill is saying if you run 1,000 beach maps, you'll presumably get a lot of one type of orb. Yeah, you'll get a lot of beach scrying orbs, at least according to what's said in the patch notes. But you're going to want to run specific ones, I think. Item class amulets. So we have now the Pearlescent amulet, which is a tri-res amulet base. This will be fantastic early game and dumpster tier end game, like every base game amulet actually. Fantastic early, dumpster tier, except for Coral Amulet. Coral Amulet's dumpster early as well. But Pearlescent is going to be very good early, and then is going to get outclassed by Heist Amulets. All these talismans, they're a lot better than they were before, but they're all likely to be outclassed by Heist Amulets, I believe. I guess we shall find out. I hope that's the case. Oh yeah, people are pointing out that I was probably wrong on these. These Zorath's Eyes are the Abyss boss. That makes sense. Thank you all for that. It's kind of funny the way that the timing works on the delay with YouTube. Like when I'm streaming, there's about a 15-second delay. So I'll say something that's wrong, and then 15 seconds later, everyone will be like, hey, Gog, you got this wrong. And everyone will say it at the same time. And then we have Ghost Flame Blade is a new item class of one-handed swords. And that's intriguing. I guess we'll find out more about that. Enshrouded items, we know about those already. Item class chart, these are presumably the things that are available for accessing the new content. And then we have these 3. Divine Shard. I mean, you know exactly what that sounds like it's going to give you, but is there a... Yeah, there isn't a Divine card for... There isn't a Divine Orb card for 1 Divine, is there? I don't think there's the Divination card, the Fortunate, for 2 Divines. There's one for 7. There's one for... there's a couple others that are like large ones. Divine Shard, I can only imagine that that's like 1/20th of a Divine Orb, which would be really funny if that's the case. Energy Sword, no idea what that's going to give you. Like, trying to think what would be thematically appropriate. And Pearls Before Swine, not really sure on any of those. But Divine Shard, if this is a set of 20, that would be hilarious as a meme. That would be really, really funny if it's 1/1/17th of a Divine Orb just to mess with us. Yeah, that'd be really funny. Yeah, you could be right. Energy Sword could be a 21/23 Energy Blade or something like that. Bunch of things that could be there. And renamed items, we already knew Dark Pact was getting a rename, and Minion Pack support renamed to renamed. That's getting obliterated. And here's something that's actually quite important. This is telling us the changes to the Pantheon. So if you want to find out where you get your Pantheon bosses done, this is the information here. Otherwise, there's nothing that's really surprising here. All the old talismans are getting obliterated. All the incubators, nothing that's a surprise there either. So everything that's in here is stuff that we pretty much already knew. That's still interesting to have a look at, though, just see if there's anything that's come up. And it looks like that is basically the new information that we've got here. Now, one thing I wanted to mention to people that I am currently working on. So this is not really a flashbang, but there's a tiny flashbang associated with it. This is a bit brighter than what you were looking at, but not very bright. Because it is in dark mode. I am working on a summary of something I would recommend, not necessarily a precise build I would recommend, but an archetype I would recommend for every area of content in the game. There's something that I want to put together over on Twitch rather than here. I was actually planning on, before the information came out about all of the spell dot changes, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to jump over on Twitch and write this today. But then just before I did that, we got the notification that I got the notification on Discord that all of this information had gone up. So this is something that I wanted to sort of bring to people's attention to expect in the future. I don't know how far off it'll be, but I do want to have it done at some point. Really, I want it done today. So today is my Wednesday. Questions coming up in chat. Would I suggest Val Ice Nova as a crit-based assassin setup? Honestly, I would want to seriously think about it. So the reason I say Val Ice Nova got a huge buff is because we go to the Val Ice Nova. 10% reduced area of effect each repeat, previously 20%, is tremendous. Crit got a bonus, and the instant application damage got a bonus. So basically, it's better in every way. And also, Legion's gotten a gloss up, and this will be fantastic for Legion. It'll be fantastic also for the New Abyss, probably. This thing is something that's there that's like, you are a specialist farmer. You are not good at generic content. You are just good at going into a map, finding the Legion, finding the Abyss, and utterly obliterating it with Val Ice Nova. You've got to be okay with that playstyle. You've got to be all right with that. But if you are, this should be absolutely godly. I think the one thing you want to do, like, because you're playing as an assassin, at least in your mind, you would want to have the increased AoE that is on cluster jewels that ties to the number of power charges that you've got on your character. Look up the hard limit on that. I think it is a 50% ink AoE hard limit on it. So you want to have that. You want to have a couple of other things that you can get from the Templar area of the tree. You might also want to consider it on the Inquisitor. I feel like the Inquisitor is where I would go if I was going to go really hard on Val Ice Nova, but I haven't thought hard about this. So, and you could also go Elementalist as well, because Elementalist is just universally good with spell builds. And you can also go Occultist. Yep, Occultist is going to give you vast power. So you've got lots of options there. The thing is, you've got to then go and work out which of them is the best overall. And yeah, you will want to use Carcass Jack as your chess piece, probably. Although that's going to make you squishier. And again, that might make you want to lean towards going Occultist or Elementalist or Inquisitor over Assassin. But this is something that is going to take a bunch of playing around to figure out. You also need to figure out how your soul gain, how you're going to regain souls after you fired off your Val Ice Nova. But it's going to be really solid. Questions come up. How do we know where Apothecary will drop? The answer is we'll find that out when standard players log into the game. When standard players log into the game, they'll be able to search their atlas and just do a search for Apothecary. If you really want to know the answer to that, that's Meerkat's Wow 96. You can just log into standard once yourself, and you'll be able to find it out. So yeah, there's a lot of things. Actually, the more that I think about it, AIU FFS is really pointing out in chat there that Elementalist might be the way to go for Val Ice Nova. So with Elementalist, you've got access to unconditional damage from the Flame Golem. You've got a bunch of just like defenses from the Stone Golem and the Chaos Golem that are really significant. But the main thing that you're getting is Convergence. Until you start hitting nasty enemies, you're going to get a massive amount of AoE. Once you hit a nasty enemy, you've then got some more damage on bosses. Yeah, the more that I think about it, the more I'm like, I think you're right. You want to go Elementalist with this and potentially Forbidden Jewel in vast power off the Occultist if you can. And yeah, you get shocked. You get all these good stuff. Yep. Yeah, I'm sold on that. Val Ice Nova. If you want to play Val Ice Nova, please theory craft it first. Don't just get baited in based on this discussion, but play it as an Elementalist and rather than an assassin. I think you've just got more going for you overall, and use strength, intelligence, gear everywhere. So maybe you want to use a chess piece that is a Twilight Regalia, but use strength in everywhere else so that you get all of the all of that mastery, that really, really strong mastery. And another point that's come up is that power charge gear will be expensive this league. I think that's true for the top end stuff. So if you're wanting to go with the Relicash plus Malakai's Loop plus Corrupted Ramirez Banquet on each ring, then yes, that's going to be tremendously expensive. And in fact, the fact there's so much hype for this is the reason I want to league start Breach, because I want to be creating those Foulborn Ramirez Banquets and selling them to people that are doing that. But just getting 3 power charges on the tree is free, and there is a couple of things that are a bit cheaper that you can use as well. So yeah, Elementalist is where I would go if I was going to go Val Ice Nova. The more that I think about it, the more that's the way to go. Anyways, I am going to call it at this point. Thank you all for tuning in. Those of you that joined late, you can jump back to the start. Of course, with the live stream, I can't edit it, so there's going to be the odd little thing in there that's a bit clunky. But I'm going to leave it there. May your Valorbs have cursed results, and I will see you on, my Saturday, your Friday for League Start, but I will definitely be going live on Twitch at some point today while I put together this spreadsheet of all of the different mechanics and the like. And then that will make a YouTube video at some point. If you prefer to wait for the polished version, then just wait for the YouTube video. I'm going to be playing Penance Brand Ignite Elementalist most likely. And that's because I've decided I want to start with a Breach focus and potentially a couple of other similar mechanics. So catch you all. Have fun.